All right, so let's try and unpack this. We're looking at a figure today who feels like she inhabits, I don't know, 3 or 4 different worlds all at the same time.
It's a lot to juggle.
I mean, think about it. Usually you have your high literature authors, the ones who win the serious awards, get studied in universities. They're sort of in one box.
The serious reclusive writer, yeah.
Then, in a totally separate universe, you have your pop culture icons. The people who get sampled by Beyoncé, who sit front row at Dior shows in Paris.
That's the celebrity box. Totally different skill set, different audience.
And then maybe in a third corner, you've got your political firebrands, the public intellectuals who get into these really heated debates on cable news or on Twitter.
Right, the activist or the provocateur. And the traditional wisdom is you pick a lane. You can't be all three.
But the subject of our deep dive today just refuses to pick a lane.
Yeah.
We are going into the life and work of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
And for so many people, that name immediately brings up the TED Talks.
Oh, absolutely. The danger of a single story, or we should all be feminists. They're iconic. But when I started looking at just the stack of research for this, I realized those talks are, they're just the tip of the iceberg.
They're the entry point, for sure. A very powerful entry point. But if you stop there, you miss the actual substance, the complexity of her work. Adichie is what some media scholars might call a transmedia phenomenon.
Transmedia phenomenon, I like that.
Yeah, she's a novelist, first and foremost. You can't forget that. But her influence just... it bleeds into everything, into fashion, into gender politics, post-colonial theory, even into the way we talk about cancel culture.
And we have to address the elephant in the room right at the start. We're recording this in February of 2026. And this is a very specific and a very, very heavy moment in her timeline.
It is. It's impossible to ignore.
She released a new novel, Dream Count, just last year, in 2025, which we will definitely get to. But right now, the headlines are, well, they're just devastating.
It's a tragedy that, no parent should ever have to even imagine, let alone endure. In January 2026, just last month, she lost her son.
Our young son.
Her very young son. It's a developing situation, and it involves these really serious allegations of medical negligence in a hospital in Lagos. And it has completely shaken not just her family, but the entire nation of Nigeria and, honestly, the literary world at large.
So as we go through her career today, her incredible rise, we just have to hold that context in our minds.
Yeah.
We are analyzing the life of a woman who is, right now, as we speak, navigating the absolute darkest valley of her personal life.
It casts a very long shadow over everything.
It adds such a layer of poignancy to everything we're going to discuss. So our mission today is to trace that arc. How does a young girl growing up in a university town in Nigeria, a girl who read British storybooks, become what people call Africa's preeminent storyteller?
It's quite a journey.
We need to look at the books. Really look at them, not just the blurbs on the back. And we have to look at the controversies. Because, and this is a key point, she has never, ever shied away from a fight.
She really hasn't. And I think the best place to start is with that very idea of the storyteller. Because her own origin story, it's almost too perfect. If you put it in a novel, an editor might send it back and say it's a little too on the nose.
I was reading about her childhood housing situation, and you are absolutely right. You really can't make this up. So she was born in Enugu in 1977, but she grew up in Nsukka.
Right, in a university town.
And the specific house she lived in. Tell me about the previous tenant of that house.
It is the ultimate literary coincidence, or maybe destiny, depending on how you look at it. Her father, James Adichie, was a professor of statistics at the University of Nigeria. Her mother, Grace, was the first female registrar there.
An academic family through and through.
Absolutely. So they lived in university housing. And the house they were assigned had, just before them, been occupied by Chinua Achebe.
Wait, hold on. The Chinua Achebe. The man who wrote Things Fall Apart.
The very same.
Yeah.
The grandfather of modern African literature. The man who essentially proved to the entire Western world that African literature was a serious, profound art form. So Adichie grew up, running through the same hallways, living in the same rooms where he might have drafted some of his most important work.
That feels like destiny. Like you just breathe in the air in that house and you have to become a writer. It's just in the walls.
Mm-hmm.
So was she writing these incredible stories about Igbo villages and yams from age 5?
See, that's where you'd think the story goes. It's the logical next step. But It's actually the opposite. And this is so crucial to understanding her entire worldview, especially that single story idea.
Okay.
She was a voracious reader as a child, just devoured books. But the books that were available to her were almost exclusively British children's books. Enid Blyton.
Oh, like the famous 5. The Secret Seven, all that stuff.
Exactly. Very, very British, very white, very middle-class, mid-century stuff. So when Adichie started writing her own little stories around age 7 or so, she wasn't writing about Nsukka. She wasn't writing about the heat or eating mangoes off the tree.
What was she writing about?
She was writing about characters who were white, characters who had blue eyes, who played in the snow, and who ate apples all the time.
Wait, had she ever eaten an apple at that point? Or
Yeah.
seen snow?
No. She lived in Nigeria. She had never seen snow in her life. She said in her TED Talk she didn't know what ginger beer tasted like, but her characters were constantly drinking it because that's what the characters in her books did.
Wow. That's wild. It's like she didn't realize her own reality was allowable in the world of fiction.
That is the psychological erasure of colonialism in a nutshell. It's so powerful. It wasn't that she didn't like her life or her world. It's that she had unconsciously internalized this idea that books are foreign things. Books are places where foreign people do foreign things.
So people who looked like her, who ate the food she ate.
People with skin the color of chocolate, as she says. People whose kinky hair couldn't form a ponytail. She just didn't think they could exist inside the pages of a novel.
That's actually kind of heartbreaking when you think about it. You're basically erasing yourself from your own imagination before you even get started. So what broke the spell? When did she have that light bulb moment of, oh, wait, I could be in a book?
It was when she was about 10 years old. She finally stumbled upon African writers. She discovered the literature of her own continent. She read Achebe's Things Fall Apart, which is so fitting, given the house.
Right.
And Kamarle from Guinea, Buchi Emecheta. And she said it was a complete shock to the system. It was a mental shift. Suddenly, she was reading and seeing her own name, or names like hers. She was reading about the food she ate. She realized that literature wasn't just a window into England. It could be a mirror reflecting her own world.
And speaking of names, I found it fascinating that Chimamanda wasn't actually the name she used growing up. That came later.
No, she was born Grace Ngozi Adichie. Grace was after her mother.
So where does Chimamanda come from?
It was a choice she made. It was part of her finding her own identity, which is a recurring theme in her work. During her Catholic confirmation, she was looking for a new name. And interestingly, before she settled on Chimamanda, she went through a phase where she wanted to be Amanda.
Amanda, that sounds very American, very Sweet Valley High.
It does, doesn't it? It was very Western. She even published a poetry collection in 1997, a very early work called Decisions, under the name Amanda N. Adichie.
No way.
Yes. But eventually she realized that Amanda didn't really fit the writer she was becoming. It felt like a costume. So she embraced Chimamanda, which is a beautiful Igbo name. It means my God will not fall, or my God will not fail.
That's powerful. It was a reclaiming of her heritage.
A conscious one.
But she didn't go straight from that realization into writing as a career, did she? Because coming from that kind of Nigerian academic family, I'm guessing novelist wasn't at the top of the approved careers list?
You would be guessing right. The expectation was for something stable, something prestigious. Doctor, lawyer, engineer.
The classic immigrant parent dream.
Exactly. So she did what was expected. She started studying medicine and pharmacy at the University of Nigeria. She did that for about a year and a half.
I cannot picture her in a lab coat titrating chemicals.
Apparently, she was doing fine academically, but her heart just wasn't in it. Her passion was elsewhere. She was editing a campus magazine on the side. It was called The Compass. And that's where she was really alive. Eventually, at age 19, she made the break.
A huge decision.
A life-changing one. She left the medical path, left Nigeria, and moved to the United States to study communications and political science. First at Drexel in Philadelphia, and then she transferred to Eastern Connecticut State University.
Wow, that must have been a massive culture shock. I mean, going from Nsukka to Connecticut.
Massive. And this is really where her deep understanding of race in America began to form, which we'll see is the absolute bedrock of Americanah. But academically, she crushed it. She graduated summa cum laude.
And she didn't stop there.
Oh, no. She was just collecting degrees. She then went to Johns Hopkins for a master's in creative writing, and after that to Yale for a master's in African studies. She was building this incredible intellectual foundation.
But all the degrees in the world don't guarantee you a book deal. I read about the rejection letter she got for her first novel. And honestly, it made my blood boil.
It's the classic, infuriating gatekeeping of the publishing industry. This is when she was shopping around the manuscript for what would become Purple Hibiscus. And agents, they told her the writing was beautiful, the prose was stunning, but
There's always a but.
the but was the setting. They said, this is great, but could you? Could you change it? Could you make it America? Or maybe make the African characters more familiar?
Make them more familiar. What does that even mean? It sounds like a coded way of saying make them fit our stereotypes.
That's exactly what it means. It means make them fit the single story. They didn't want a story about a complex, middle-class, psychologically nuanced Nigerian family dealing with religious fanaticism. They wanted the Africa they already knew from the news.
Poverty, war, AIDS, maybe a safari with a lion.
That's the stuff that sold. They basically told her that no one in the West would buy a book about regular, complicated life in Nigeria.
Thank God she didn't listen to them.
She refused to compromise, and that's a pattern with her. She eventually found an agent, Jonna Pearson Morris, who believed in the book as it was, and Algonquin Books published Purple Hibiscus in 2003.
And that brings us to the first of what I think of as her big three novels.
The foundational trilogy, in a way.
Let's dive into these because I feel like people know the titles, but I really want to get into what makes them tick. So, Purple Hibiscus, it's her debut. It's a coming-of-age story, right?
It is, but it's a very dark and claustrophobic one. It's narrated by a 15-year-old girl named Kambili. And on the surface, her life looks perfect. Her father, Eugene, is a wealthy factory owner. He's a devout Catholic, a pillar of the community who wins human rights awards for his newspaper. He's a big man.
A respected figure. But behind closed doors.
Behind closed doors, he is an absolute tyrant. He's violently abusive to his wife and his 2 children. It's this terrifying blend of a religious piety and domestic terror. If they sin, if they fail to come first in their class, he punishes them physically in the most horrific ways.
So the whole book is just tense.
It's suffocatingly tense. Kambili, the narrator, barely speaks above a whisper for the first half of the book because she is so conditioned by fear. She's terrified of stepping out of line.
It's interesting you mentioned the father's a big man in the community, so he's not just a one-dimensional cartoon villain.
That's the nuance Adichie brings, even in her debut. He is a villain, 100%. But he is also presented as a product, a victim even, of colonialism. He has internalized the British colonial religion so deeply that he rejects his own Igbo culture completely.
How does it manifest?
Well, he speaks English at home, not Igbo. He refers to his own father as a pagan and refuses to let his children visit him. He believes, with every fiber of his being, that to be good is to be English and Catholic, and anything traditional, anything African, is evil. His violence comes from this twisted, fanatical desire to save his family from their own heritage.
That is so heavy. But there's a crack of light, right?
Yeah.
And Kambili and her brother get an escape. They go to visit their aunt.
They do. They go to stay with their auntie Ifeoma, and Ifeoma is the absolute heart and soul of that book. She's the counterpoint to Eugene in every way. She's a university lecturer. She's widowed. She's poor. She's constantly struggling to buy gas for her beat-up car, but her tiny apartment is full of laughter and debate and loud music.
It's freedom.
It is total freedom. And this is where that term womanism comes in, which is often used to describe her work.
How is that different from feminism in this context?
Well, womanism, particularly in an African context, is often seen as being more community and family-oriented. Auntie Ifeoma isn't fighting against men in the abstract. She's fighting for the survival and dignity of her family unit. She runs a democratic household where her children are encouraged to argue with her. She teaches Kambili that you can question authority, that you're allowed to have a voice.
So it's this incredible contrast. Kambili's father has all the money and power, but his house is a silent prison. Auntie Ifeoma has no money, but her house is overflowing with joy and life.
Precisely. And that's where the title comes from, the purple hibiscus itself.
It's an experimental flower, right? Not a common one.
Exactly. It's a rare, special hybrid that Auntie Ifeoma's botanist friend created. It's not supposed to exist, but it does. It's beautiful and defiant, and it can grow even in difficult soil. And that's the perfect metaphor for Kambili finding her own voice, her own unique identity.
So the book ends on a note of hope, then.
Cautious hope. It's not a fairy tale ending. But there's the possibility of a new life, symbolized by this idea of the arrival of a king, which refers to Palm Sunday, and the new rains that wash things clean.
So Purple Hibiscus puts her on the literary map. It gets nominated for major prizes. Critics loved it. But then came 2006, and she drops Half of a Yellow Sun. And this was the blockbuster. This changed the game.
This was the book that proved she wasn't a one-hit wonder. This was her epic. It's a massive, sweeping historical novel set during the Biafran War.
That was the Nigerian Civil War, late 1960s.
Right, and for listeners who might not be familiar with the history, it's essential context. In 1967, the Igbo people of southeastern Nigeria, following a series of massacres against them in other parts of the country, seceded to form their own independent nation, the Republic of Biafra.
And the Nigerian government did not accept that.
Not at all. They fought to take the territory back. It turned into a brutal 3-year war, largely defined by the Nigerian government's blockade of Biafra, which led to mass starvation. Hundreds of thousands, maybe over 1 million civilians, died from hunger.
Adichie wasn't born yet when this happened, right?
No, she was born 7 years after the war ended. But the war is the defining trauma of her people, the Igbo people. It's in the soil. She lost both of her grandfathers in that war. She grew up hearing the stories, living in the shadow of it. Writing this book was her way of excavating her parents' trauma, of bearing witness.
The thing that struck me so forcefully about this book, and I think is her superpower as a writer, is the sensory detail. It doesn't read like a dry history lesson at all. It reads like you can smell it, you can taste the food or the lack of it.
That is Adichie's genius. She grounds the horror of history in the mundane, in the details of daily life. In the first part of the book, before the war, you're introduced to these characters, Odenigbo, the radical university professor, and Olana, his glamorous lover.
And their life is good.
Their life is fantastic. They're part of this new post-independence intellectual elite. And Adichie gives you these incredible details, like a description of their fridge being full of cold beer and oranges and roasted shimmering chicken. They sit around debating politics over glasses of brandy. It's a life of abundance and ideas.
And then the war starts, and the shimmering chicken disappears.
Slowly, and then all at once, the fridge empties out, the brandy is gone, the shimmering chicken is replaced by, well, nothing. And then eventually they're eating lizards to survive. They're eating powdered egg yolks that come from humanitarian aid drops. She shows you the degradation of war, not just through battles and bombs, but through the quiet horror of your hair starting to fall out from malnutrition, of your ribs starting to show through your skin.
There's a character in the book, the houseboy, Ugu. He's probably my favorite character. He's this young boy from a poor village who comes to work for Odenigbo.
And he's the moral center of the book in many ways. His journey is incredible.
And there's a scene, a small moment, where Odenigbo is teaching him about history that I feel is crucial to understanding Adichie's entire philosophy.
The Mungo Park lesson.
Yes.
It's so important.
Tell us about it.
Odenigbo sees Ugu reading a colonial textbook, and he asks him what he's learning. Ugu tells him that the book says the Scottish explorer Mungo Park discovered the Niger River, and Odenigbo just scoffs. He asks Ugu, how can a white man discover a river that our people have been fishing in for centuries?
It's just absurd when you say it out loud like that. Like, all the people fishing didn't know where they were until a white guy showed up with a map and a flag.
Precisely. It exposes the arrogance of the colonial narrative. But then Odenigbo tells Ugu something very pragmatic, and this is the key part. He says, of course that's rubbish, but you must write it on your exam so you can pass.
Wow.
It perfectly captures the double consciousness of the colonized subject. You have to know the truth, that your history is valid, that your people were there first, but you also have to learn to parrot the colonizers' lies just to survive and succeed within their system.
That book won everything, didn't it? The Orange Prize. And then years later, it was named the winner of winners from 25 years of that prize. It was made into a movie with Fandimi Newton and Chiwetel Ejiofor. It just felt like the African novel of the decade.
It absolutely was. It took a very specific, very painful local history and made it universal. But then, true to form, she pivoted again. In 2013, she released Americanah. And this felt completely different.
Yeah, this wasn't historical fiction. This was bitingly contemporary. It was sharp, it was funny, and it was about something incredibly messy, race in America.
And race in Nigeria and the space between the two.
This is the book that introduces that concept of the global Black experience. The main character, Ifemelu, she moves from Nigeria to the U.S. for university. And she has this profound realization. She says she didn't know she was Black until she came to America.
That is the core thesis of the novel. In Nigeria, Ifemelu isn't Black. Nobody is Black because everybody is Black. It's not an identity marker. She is Igbo. She's a woman. She's middle class. Her identity is defined by ethnicity, by class, by region.
But then she lands at JFK Airport.
And suddenly she is assigned this monolithic label, Black. And with that label, She inherits all the historical baggage of American slavery and Jim Crow and the civil rights struggle, a history that she personally has no direct connection to. She has to learn how to be Black in America.
She starts a blog in the book to process all of this, right? The title is amazing.
It's brilliant. Race-teenth, or various observations about American Blacks, those formerly known as Negroes, by a non-American Black.
That blog was such a clever literary device. It allowed Adichie to basically break the fourth wall and just drop these sharp, insightful essays right into the middle of the novel.
It did. She uses it to critique everything. She critiques the oppression Olympics, where different minority groups argue over who has it worse. She critiques the way well-meaning white liberals tiptoe around race with this awkward, pained politeness.
And we have to talk about the hair. My God, there is so much about hair in this book.
Hair is central. It's a whole political battlefield. There's a heartbreaking scene early on where a Femilu is trying to get a corporate job, and she's told by an African-American woman that she needs to relax her hair, to chemically straighten it, to look professional.
A process which involves putting caustic chemicals on your head that literally burn your scalp.
It physically hurts. It's painful. But the societal message is crystal clear. Your natural self is unprofessional. Your natural self is messy, unruly. To be successful, to assimilate, you must mimic whiteness.
And the scene where she finally cuts off all the relaxed hair and goes natural is this huge moment of liberation.
It is a massive moment of claiming agency. It's not just about a hairstyle, it's about refusing to apologize for your own genetics. It's a political act.
Americanah felt like it captured the Obama era perfectly. That weird mix of hope and progress, but also the dawning realization that actually, no, we're not a post-racial society at all. It was a monster hit.
It was. It won the National Book Critics Circle Award. It was on every best of the year list. But here's the thing. While she was writing these dense, brilliant, prize-winning novels, she was also simultaneously blowing up on a totally different platform.
The TED stage.
This is where the transmedia aspect really kicks into high gear. In 2009, she gave the talk, The Danger of a Single Story,
which I think is now required viewing for basically every high school student in the English-speaking world.
It has over 27 million views on the TED website alone. It's one of the most viewed talks of all time, and it's so effective because the concept is so simple, so powerful. If you only ever hear one story about a people, that they are poor, or that they are criminals, or that they are terrorists, that becomes the only reality in your mind. It robs people of their complexity, their humanity.
But then came the 2012 talk, We Should All Be Feminists.
And that talk changed everything, because a year later, in December 2013, Beyoncé dropped her surprise self-titled visual album.
And right in the middle of the song, Flawless, suddenly there is Chimamanda's voice, clear as a bell. We teach girls to shrink themselves, to make themselves smaller.
It was a cultural earthquake. You had the biggest pop star on the planet sampling a Nigerian novelist talking about feminist theory. But it wasn't without its controversy. You had some academic purists who said Beyoncé wasn't a real feminist because, she performs for the male gaze, she dances in revealing outfits.
Did Adichie care about any of that?
Not in the slightest. She defended Beyoncé completely. She famously said in an interview, "Whoever says they're feminist is bloody feminist." She understood that Beyoncé could reach millions and millions of young girls that a literary novel never, ever would. She refused to be a gatekeeper for feminism.
And she also took that message into the world of high fashion, which, again, feels like a contradiction to some people. The stereotype of the serious female intellectual is that she's supposed to be frumpy.
Right, above it all.
Like, if you care about lipstick and a nice dress, you can't possibly care about post-colonial politics.
That is precisely the stereotype Adichie despises. She loves fashion. She's been very vocal about it. She views it as a form of armor, of agency, of self-expression. And she made a huge splash when she sat front row at the Dior show when the new creative director, Maria Grazia Chiuri, sent a model down the runway wearing a simple white T-shirt that just said, "We should all be feminists."
I remember that shirt. It cost something like $800.
It did, which sparked a whole other debate about capitalism and co-opting activism. But Adichie took the idea and made it her own in a much more grassroots way. She launched the Wear Nigerian campaign on her Instagram.
This was managed by her two nieces, right?
Yes, Chisholm and Amaka. The rule was simple. For all her public appearances, she would only wear clothing made by Nigerian designers. And this wasn't just about vanity or looking good, it was a form of economic activism.
Right, she wanted to boost the local industry.
She wanted to pump money and, more importantly, global attention into the local textile and design industry. She wanted to show the world that Nigerian design was high fashion, that it deserved a place on the world stage. It was putting her money and her platform where her mouth is. It even won a Shorty Award in 2018.
So she is just everywhere. She's a literary bestseller. She's a fashion icon. She's a global feminist hero.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get that big and when you speak your mind that freely on so many topics, you're going to make enemies. And Adichie has found herself right in the middle of some of the most intense culture wars of the last decade.
She has. And I think this is where her complexity really, really shows. Because she does not just toe the party line of Western progressivism. She thinks for herself.
Let's maybe start with the media interactions, because she had a very famous, very tense run-in with the BBC about Donald Trump back in 2016.
Oh, this was a classic ambush interview. She went on the BBC's flagship news program, Newsnight, thinking she was doing a standard one-on-one interview about her work in American politics.
But that's not what happened.
No. The BBC had also booked R. Emmett Terrell, Jr., who was the editor of a very conservative magazine, The American Spectator, and a hardcore Trump supporter. And they didn't really warn her that she was being set up for a debate.
So they just pitted her against him, live on air.
Exactly. And Terrell was on there making the argument that Donald Trump wasn't racist. Adichie, very calmly, pushed back. She cited Trump's comments about Judge Gonzalo Curiel. Remember, Trump said the judge couldn't do his job fairly because of his Mexican heritage.
Which is, I mean, that's pretty much the textbook definition of racism.
It is. But when Adichie pointed this out, Terrell looked at her very condescendingly and said, "I do not respond emotionally like this lady."
Ugh, emotionally.
Oh.
The oldest, most tired trick in the book to discredit a woman. A woman has a fact-based opinion? No, she's just being emotional.
Adichie's facial expression in that moment was priceless. It went viral. She very calmly and coolly dismantled his argument. But that specific moment highlighted exactly the kind of casual sexism that powerful, intellectual women face all the time. But she doesn't just fight with the state, right? She famously challenged Hillary Clinton, too.
This was the Twitter bio thing. I remember this.
It was in 2018 during a PN World Voices event. She was on stage interviewing Clinton, and she asked her a very direct question. She said, "Why does your Twitter bio start with the word wife?"
Oh?
She pointed out that Bill Clinton's bio didn't start with husband. She asked why a woman of Hillary Clinton's incredible stature still felt the need to define herself by her marriage, first and foremost.
That takes some serious guts. To sit next to Hillary Clinton and tell her to fix her Twitter bio.
It really does. And the amazing thing is, Clinton actually changed it. She took the note. But those, you could say, were the safe controversies. The one that really caused a massive fracture in her progressive fan base was the issue of transgender rights.
Yeah, this is the big one. And it's complicated. It started around 2017 in an interview she did with Channel 4 in the UK. What exactly did she say? Because it gets misquoted and simplified all the time.
It does. So the interviewer asked her if trans women are women. And Adichie's initial answer was yes, trans women are women. But then she added a distinction, a piece of nuance. She said that a trans woman's experience of womanhood is not the same as the experience of a woman who was born and raised female from birth.
And what was her reasoning for that?
Her argument was that a trans woman, prior to transitioning, lived in the world being perceived as male and therefore, for a portion of her life, benefited from male privilege. She argued that socialization matters, that it shapes your experience, and to pretend it doesn't exist is to erase a significant part of the story.
And the backlash was immediate and intense.
It was fierce. Critics argued that she was creating a hierarchy of womanhood, that she was basically saying trans women were lesser women, or women with an asterisk. One of her own former students from her writing workshop, the celebrated non-binary writer Akwake Emezi, publicly and very strongly called her out. Adichie was almost instantly labeled a TERF, a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, by a large part of the online community.
So what did she do? Did she apologize, walk it back? Because the standard PR move in that situation is to issue a statement saying, "I'm listening and learning, and I'm sorry for the harm I caused."
She did not do the standard PR move at all. She doubled down on her belief in nuance. In 2020, when J.K. Rowling published her now infamous, very long essay on sex and gender, Adichie publicly called it a perfectly reasonable piece. And then in 2021, Adichie published a massive 3-part essay on her own website titled "It is Obscene."
I read that essay. It was scorching. It was a declaration of war.
It was a scorched earth critique of what she sees as the tactics of cancel culture. She didn't really relitigate the specific trans debate in the essay. Instead, she attacked the behavior of her critics, particularly the former students she felt had betrayed her. She argued that social media has created a generation that demands ideological purity, that is choking on sanctimony,
Right.
and that uses abstract academic words like violence to describe mere disagreement.
So her core argument became less about gender theory and more about freedom of speech. It was, you can disagree with me, but trying to destroy my reputation and career because I acknowledge biological sex is toxic and obscene.
Exactly. And what's so important to add here is the geographical context. While she was being painted as this conservative, transphobic villain in the U.S. and the U.K. for these comments, back in her home country of Nigeria, she's considered a radical progressive on these very issues.
Right, because Nigeria passed a really harsh anti-gay law in 2014.
A truly draconian law, the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act. It criminalizes gay relationships with up to 14 years in prison. And Chimamanda was one of the loudest, most prominent Nigerian voices opposing that law. She wrote essays calling it unjust and un-African. She was best friends with Binyavanga Wainaina, a prominent Kenyan writer who was openly gay. She eulogized him beautifully when he died.
So the narrative that she is broadly anti-LGBT is just.
Yeah.
It's too simple. That doesn't hold up.
It's a single story. She supports gay rights legally and vocally in a place where it is genuinely dangerous to do so, but she refuses to align perfectly with the very latest Western academic theories on gender identity. She's ideologically independent.
It goes right back to that core idea. You can't just put her in the liberal hero box or the conservative villain box. She simply will not fit.
She navigates by her own compass, for better or for worse.
Now, we have to move to the most recent chapter of her life. And this is by far the hardest part to talk about.
Okay.
The last few years, really from 2020 leading up to today in 2026, have been defined by just wave after wave of unimaginable grief for her.
It really started with the pandemic. In June of 2020, her beloved father died suddenly of complications from kidney failure. And because of all the COVID lockdowns and travel restrictions, she was stuck in the U.S. She couldn't get back to Nigeria to be with him or to bury him immediately. For someone from a culture where those funeral rites are so important, it was a special kind of torture for her.
And then before she could even begin to process that loss.
Her mother died in March of 2021. On her late husband's birthday, of all days. So within the space of about 9 months, she lost both anchors of her life. The two people who raised her in that Chinua Achebe house. She wrote a beautiful, gut-wrenching memoir about this called Notes on Grief.
I took a look at that. She talks about the madness of grief. How it's not just sadness. It's a physical unraveling. It's a rage.
She describes it as a cruel kind of education. She writes about how the actual sides of her ribs hurt from the force of her crying. It also changed her relationship with religion. She was raised Catholic, as we said, but drifted away because she felt the Nigerian church was too focused on money and guilt. But in her grief, she found herself drawn back to the rituals, to the comfort of the familiar prayers, though she describes herself now as fundamentally agnostic and questioning.
And during all this time, she was also raising her own family. She has a daughter who was born in 2016. And then very privately, she had twin boys in 2024 who were born via a surrogate.
She kept the birth of the twins very quiet. She's fiercely protective of her children's privacy. She even wrote a wonderful children's book last year, Mama's Sleeping Scarf, but she published it under a pseudonym, Nua Grace James.
Which means?
Child of Grace and James. It was a tribute to her late parents. It was this sweet, gentle period of new motherhood after so much loss. But then we arrive at January 7th, 2026.
This is the news that is still breaking as we record this. Her son, Nkanu.
Yes. Nkanu Nandamdi, one of the twins. He was only 21 months old.
And the details that Adichie and her family have released are just. They make you sick with anger. This wasn't a tragic illness or an accident. She alleges it was pure medical negligence.
She has been very, very specific in her allegations. He was admitted to Eurocare Hospital in Lagos, which is meant to be a high-end, top-tier facility. She alleges that when he went into respiratory distress, he was denied oxygen because the staff couldn't find the key to the supply room or didn't have the supply ready. She also claims they sedated him excessively, which she believes led to a heart attack.
A heart attack in a toddler.
That is her allegation. The hospital, as you'd expect, has denied it. They've cited patient confidentiality and insisted they followed standard procedures. But Adichie is furious, and her public fury has ignited this massive, painful conversation in Nigeria.
Because the question everyone is asking is, if Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, a woman with money, with global fame, with powerful connections, if she can't get safe, basic medical care for her child in the best hospital in Lagos, then who can? What hope is there for anyone else?
Precisely. It exposes the utter systemic collapse of the healthcare infrastructure in the country, and it's a tragedy that has become a national rallying cry. We're seeing protests, op-eds, but for her personally, it is a devastation that we can't even begin to comprehend.
And this happened right after she released her first novel in over a decade, Dream Count, in 2025.
The timing is just another layer of cruelty. Dream Count is getting incredible reviews. It deals with many of her classic themes, the grit of womanhood, the physical realities of the female body, and now she is living through the ultimate, brutal, physical reality of loss. It puts her entire career, her entire public life, in this state of suspended animation.
How do you go on a book tour when you have just buried your child?
You don't. You just survive.
You survive.
So as we look at this entire arc, from the little girl in Nsukka writing stories about snow, to the global literary titan, to this grieving mother demanding justice, what is the legacy she's building? I know she received a very special title recently in her hometown. She did. In December of 2022, she was given a chieftaincy title in her ancestral town of Aba. The title is Odilua.
And what does that translate to?
The one who writes for the world.
Wow. That's perfect.
It really is, and she was the first woman in the history of her town to receive that specific title, and I think that just sums it all up. She writes for the world, but she writes from Africa. She didn't have to shed her identity, her Nigerianness, to become a global star. She forced the world to come to her, to meet her on her own terms.
And she forced us, and continues to force us, to deal with complexity.
That, I think, is the final, most important takeaway. In one of her recent BBC Wreath lectures, she said something that really stuck with me. She said that literature is in peril. She warned that if we as a culture demand ideological purity, if we demand that our writers never offend us, never challenge our dogmas, never have bad or complicated opinions, we will kill storytelling itself.
She insists on friction.
She insists on friction. She insists that people are messy and flawed. Her work and her life is a testament to the fact that there is danger, profound danger, in ever settling for a single story about anyone, including herself.
She's not a single story.
And brilliant, and controversial, and human, and that is why she matters so much.
That feels like a powerful place to leave it. This has been a heavy one, but an important one. I feel like I understand the stakes of her work and her life so much better now.
It's a necessary conversation to have.
To everyone listening, take care of yourselves. We'll be back with another deep dive soon.